We're back with the LS vs Coyote shootout. Previously, some of you might have seen the LS and Coyote face off at the engine dyno at West Tech Performance.
Like a pair of heavyweight boxers trading jabs and punches, both the LS and Coyote made tons of power. But it was the LS scoring the knockout blow with an incredible title-winning pull of 1,784.6 horsepower and 1,422.6 foot-pounds of torque. Since the LS ran the big F-1X supercharger, we want to put the street F-1A-94 ProCharger on the LS to see how much power it can make with the exact same blower that Coyote ran in the shootout. We're giving Brian Nealon and his team a limited budget to give the engine durability upgrades only. No performance upgrades are allowed. Then, we'll test just the LS to see how it would stack up with the smaller ProCharger. Let's see what Brian Nealon and his team from LME have in mind for the rebuild in the next dyno session.
Let's build an engine, let's make some horsepower.
The initial build started with a GM Bowtie LS block to build 427 cubic inches. A set of signs connecting rods and molly pistons completed the rotating assembly. Brodix BR7 cylinder heads with LME's own CNC porting. They also added valve springs and retainers. All in all, this brought the compression ratio to 11:1. They topped the entire setup with their own billet intake manifold to make sure the engine could handle a lot of boost efficiently.
The rebuild starts with replacing the stock LS7 crankshaft with a Dart aftermarket crankshaft with the same stroke.
To replace the pistons ruined in the last dyno run, 8 new molly pistons outfitted with total seal rings are added to the motor.
We replaced the factory GM head bolts with ARP head studs.
And last but definitely not least, CompCam's Max Lift BSR shaft rocker kit. With the engine back together, LME's Vinny Meneghetti, one of the best LS engine builders in the country, will run the motor on the dyno without the ProCharger to break in the motor to make sure all the parts are good to go.
I'll go and fire it up and make sure I got oil pressure mainly. I'll go in there and do a couple checks, make sure I have no leaks or nothing like that. Do a short break-in cycle, which is like a part throttle break-in cycle. And then we'll do probably do like 8 to 10 full throttle sweeps and raising RPM increments. We'll start out and go to like about 5,500 and then we'll keep going up.
The break-in pulls will be an almost steady state pull, holding at steps from 3,000 to 3,500 RPM. The full throttle sweeps after the break-in cycle are just RPM validation pulls, not power pulls. After the break-in runs, Vinny let her rip, and the LS made a cool 713 horsepower at 7,500 RPM without the ProCharger. We can't wait to see how much horsepower the LS makes with the F-1A-94 ProCharger. That's gonna happen tomorrow. It's a new day at LME, and it's time to see what the LS can do with boost. But first, Vinny needs to install the F-1A-94 supercharger. It's rated conservatively at 1,200 horsepower, but we expect bigger numbers than that using VP Racing's C85 fuel. Vinny is also installing the air-to-water intercooler from ProCharger, which will support a ton of horsepower and keep the temperature and the charge pressure air nice and cool to allow the LS to make as much power as possible. Before putting the hammer down, Vinny's going to warm up the engine and make a few runs to make sure everything is running properly. Starting slow, just to get a baseline reading, the LS was already making killer power numbers. By the third run, the LS made 1,431 peak horsepower and 1,088 peak torque. But Vinny was just getting started. With 1,448 peak horsepower and 1,134 peak torque, you had to ask, was there more on the table? To find out, the LME team installed a new smaller pulley. They also added a degree in the timing and then let it rip.
And here's the comparison: 1,548 horsepower and 1,211 torque with the street F-1A-94, and 1,784.6 horsepower and 1,422.6 torque on the larger F-1X. That's it for this round, but be sure to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more videos.